soon, which is Experiments with Truth with Janhavi Prasada and Madhav Khosla. Before we do that, we'd just like to make some general sponsor announcements. We'd just like to thank Z Entertainment, which is our title partner for the festival, Cox and Kings, which is our venue partner for Charbagh, Free Charge, the Rajasthan Tourism Board, which is our tourism partner, Amity University, our university partner, the British Council, CK Biela Hospital, Indigo, Airtel, and Coca-Cola. We'd also like to thank the Getty Foundation, BBC World Histories Magazine, our publishers, Penguin, which is their 30th birthday this year, and HarperCollins and Westland, Mahindra World City, Nestle, Dove, O Financiers, our media partners, Red FM, Rajasthan's very own Patrika Group and the Bashkar Group, the Crest, Harvard Press University, Kashmir Loom, the Azad Foundation, and Wesleyan University, MoMA, Literature Across Frontiers, the Jan Mikowski Foundation, the Aga Khan Foundation, Avid, Ambit, and we're delighted to have them as sponsors again, and also Glenlivet and Kingfisher, and finally the bookshop, which if you haven't been to already is fantastic, which is just out to my left here in front of Charbagh. That is organised by Full Circle. As I said, we're about to get underway. I will be back very soon to introduce our next session. Thank you.
Namaste. Welcome to the Z Jaipur Literature Festival 2017. In case of an emergency, please remain calm. Our volunteers and security staff will guide you to the nearest emergency exit. All emergency exits are clearly marked. There are 2 emergency exits from Samvad, one on the stage right and one on the left. There is one general exit from Samvad. Please ensure all exits and aisles are kept clear at all times. Our medical assistance desk is located at the main entrance and is available for all medical emergencies. Wheelchair facilities are also available near the medical assistance desk. Smoking is strictly prohibited at the festival. Please help us keep the venue clean. Thank you for your cooperation.
Hold your tongue, hang the rich and spare the young. bullets from the jars. Hop the fences, steal the cars. Run on fumes and from the law, and burn for us right through the fall.
I'm so excited to welcome the Jaipur Literature Festival to Melbourne. JLF Melbourne brings the greatest literary show on earth to Australia's City of Literature. Join us at Fed Square on February 11 and 12 for the best of Asian and Australian writing and ideas.
Enjoy the colour and vibrancy of Z Jaipur Literature Festival and soak in the interesting and thought-provoking sessions. But do take a pause to catch your breath at the festival's merchandise stalls. Celebrating the deep connect and collaboration between handicrafts and stories, Direct Create has curated and designed a range of unique products for you to take back home the magic of the festival. ZJLF official merchandise is available at Diggy Palace's Bazaar at Charbagh and Crafts Pool near Darbar Hall. From the 18th to the 23rd of January 2017. More information, log on to www.jaipurliteraturefestival.org/merchandise.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to the Samvad. The first session for today is session 112, Experiments with Truth, as I mentioned earlier, with Janhavi Prasada, introduced by Madhav Khosla. Janhavi works as a peace activist in the field of technology. She dedicates her time to the conservation, promotion of literature, music, environment and culture in Uttarakhand. She'll be introduced by Madhav Khosla, who's a lawyer, a political theorist, and whose most recent book is the Oxford Handbook of the Indian Constitution. It is our great pleasure to welcome them onto the stage for our first session of the day. Please give them a warm welcome. Thank you.
Don't ask me complicated questions. You can hear? Good.
Hi. So the occasion for this session is the publication of a graphic book that is the adaptation of Gandhi's autobiography. And it's interesting and important in at least two ways. So the first is that it sort of sits between being a work of genuine improvisation, imagination, and scholarship. Because on the one hand, it's an interpretation of the text, and on the other hand, it's sort of a real insight into how Gandhi is. I think the second is that, and in that sense, this puts Janhavi in sort of an awkward position to comment on it, is that it it's both very much her book, but it's also in some sense Gandhi's book. And so it's really, it takes the autobiography, it distills it, it captures certain elements of it, and it basically, so one big part of it is of course the graphic element, and that's very vivid, but the second is also just the content distillation. And I, so the initial idea for this panel, as with many new books that are published, is you have a short introduction and then the author describes the book and explicates its main thesis. But we had thought that we would just do this more as a conversation, and that sort of, that spirit of argumentation might be better suited to the book. But I thought what would be great, Janhavi, if you could just begin and just in some sense describe both how you, what you really think the book is about, and what got you to it.
Yeah. Well, it's been a long journey, Madhav, I must say. How many of you have read My Experiments with Truth? Has anybody read Gandhi? Wonderful. So I sort of stumbled on that book about 10 years ago. And I'm not much of a reader, I have to admit. But I forced myself to read, and I set about reading the autobiography. And I found it a really tedious piece of writing, very academic in nature. But the substance within that tedious book, those experiments, those insights about Gandhi, his stories from his very own mouth, sort of really stumped me. And I sort of couldn't stop till I sort of went to the last page. And that sort of really changed the way I looked at Gandhi from then on. And I set about this sort of a journey that I said I must do, meeting and finding Gandhians across the world if they exist. And I have to say that, where did I find them? I found very few from our generation in our own country, in India. Where I did find them was in the US, in UK. I traveled to Bangladesh, I went to Naukhali, I met tons of Gandhians there. I went to Nepal, Sri Lanka, and they were from different walks of life. Some were doctors, some were convicts, some were lawyers, some were gay, straight, all sorts of people. And that again struck me as, my God, his legacy still lives on. And the story sort of needs to be reinforced in a way which is simple and easy for people to understand in our generation, in our age where things are technology driven. We really don't have much time to sort of focus on one particular thing. Our attention spans are really low. The format of a graphic book, I would say, was something that just struck me because my background is media and communication. I make documentary films, so I think visually. And that's how the graphic novel idea sort of sprung up. And I said the story of Gandhi needs to be simplified and brought out for the new age time in the contemporary context.
So Janhavi, just sort of picking up on that, right? I think there are, I mean, one way in which at least I'd like to have this conversation is to look at three aspects of the book, and you sort of touch on each of these. So one is just the form in which you've told this story, right? So the fact that it's in graphic, and that's never been done before, and it's a genre that's underexplored in general. And there's something to be said about whether you use that to tell political stories, you use that to tell fiction, what other books you drew on. The second is, of course, I think it would be nice if we can talk a little bit just about content, right? So what have you taken out from the autobiography? What have you put in? What have you decided to, what made you uncomfortable? What did you think was really important? And the third, which I want to get to later, is this sort of slightly moral imperative that you seem to be motivated by. But just to look at the first one. So I think the last decade has seen a big jump in the use of graphic novels, certainly in India, right? And abroad, it's sort of a much more established genre. And in India, you see that very much in fiction, but you're also seeing a lot of other texts that are telling a slightly more complicated story, either mythology, historicized fiction, so on, and even at this festival, right? So we have a lot of sessions by Amrita Patil, who's done incredible graphic books on the Mahabharata and so on. And of course, the global standard for the kind of political story are books like Persepolis and so on. So I was wondering, so two things. One, what are the other types of graphic books that you read? And why did you think that, you said that you were motivated by, and you're sort of drawn to the visual, but there are many ways in which you can tell a visual story, right? And it's not self-evident that the visual story needs to be told through a graphic at all. And in what way do you think that this captures something unique, just the form?
You see, I read My Experiments with Truth. It was a book, right? That book sort of transformed things for me. So I wanted to do another book. Books change a person's life. They take, if they impact you, they sort of, like for me personally, they changed my life. And that's why I wanted to do another simplified version of the book. And that's why we are here for this festival in the first place, to celebrate books. Obviously, they're impacting our lives in a certain way, and they are a great medium of communication. Now, if we add certain forms, illustrations, figures into that text, it enhances the sort of the visual appeal of the book in some sense. And for me, it's a personal choice, and that's why I sort of went on the graphic format, I would say. And anything I feel which has a sort of a form, size, and shape immediately becomes attractive, you see, to the other onlooker. So that was one of the things. Plus, as I said, my background is a documentary filmmaker. I was a journalist with ANI Television earlier. The challenge that we faced was doing news bulletins was that in 3 minutes, I had to put in visuals and text together to create a story which would impact the news, the audience. And so that's a format which I'm really sort of comfortable to write very tight stories with less words, with the right sort of information in it, and complement it with the visuals. So that's something I'm very comfortable with. And as I said, I'm not much of a reader. So most of my knowledge about the world, be it world leaders, Mandela or Ambedkar, or be it about countries like Palestine or Iraq or Persia, or the mouse, which is to do with the Holocaust. Most of my knowledge about the world, I would say, is through these graphic novels. And I think parents must encourage their children to read as many comics and graphic novels as possible. You might think comics are funny, just funny and trivial. They are not. They have a very inherent and a very sort of a deep-rooted meaning and ideas behind it. Even the lines when an artist is sort of, I don't know if my illustrator is somewhere here, Uttam Sinha. There he is. Please stand up, Uttam. Ladies and gentlemen, he's the gentleman who's drawn this book. And Uttam, would you like to add something to what I'm saying about what he's asked? Yes, about the textures, the lines. Can somebody give him a mic, please? He'll be the right person to talk about textures and the lines. We worked very closely together on the book, and I made life hell for him sometimes.
Hi. So what exactly about texture?
General, talk about the visual aspect of the book, how it sort of you brought it to life.
Yeah, so
and why is it different from other Gandhi graphic novels that exist in the market? How did we sort of...
So to begin with, like we never came across any graphic novel.
Louder.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, just to begin with, we didn't see any graphic novel on Gandhi itself. And then we wanted to keep it very very Indian rooted, so that's why we opted for very brush effect, very natural, which was not very digital. So yeah, so that was one primary reason. If we can see the kind of work that we have done. Are we showing? Yeah. So it's all hand done. These were the references that we got for initial work. Yeah, the one on the right. So the left one is the storyboarding, and the one on the right is the final output. So it's all hand-drawn work. So which pretty much looks like it gives you a very feel-good connect.
Louder, louder.
Louder? Okay. Sorry. I'm a little nervous.
It's okay.
Straight. Yeah. So yeah.
This is my favorite.
So all sort of frames where.
So basically, if you see, the lines and the textures are very rough edges. They're dark. They're deep. And this is the tone that we've tried to maintain throughout the book to keep the seriousness and the depth that Gandhi is associated with. There are a number of graphic novels in the market which are manga forms, and Campfire has done one, which are really nice and interesting. They have all the information in it, but in terms of look and feel, they don't, to me personally, they come across as very synthetic. And that's the last thing that I would want Gandhi to be associated with. So I've, in my own very way, I don't know how you all perceive it, but I have tried to sort of maintain that simplicity in the visuals as well.
Just so on that, I mean, so Janhavi, when you were sort of using the main text, right, and you sort of brought it to light in this fascinating way, did you have, I mean, was it challenging in any way to actually negotiate the content? Like, were there things that you read in the book and you felt, look, I'm not going to put this in, or this is something I'm going to emphasize, or this is something I'm going to, and sorry, just one thing, and it might not be a crude form of censorship.
Right.
I mean, it'll just be a form of like emphasis and de-emphasis, right? But how did you sort of, what are the particular topics that you think you dealt with?
I think I've been pretty smart about this. That
you don't say.
That, no, I have to say it. Because I tell you, it's to do with Gandhi. You can get into any controversy. I have to be very careful with what I'm doing. I'm handling the father of the nation, right? I can't trivialize him. His autobiography is his work, right? And I have adapted it from his autobiography. So the text has closely been studied and simplified exactly from the autobiography. It's been made much more crisp. There are certain loopholes which have, and information loopholes which have been sort of filled in. So that's where I've sort of done it, and I've got it vetted by a number of historians and experts on Gandhi, senior people. Where I did experiment is the visuals, where nobody had control. So the visuals are completely my imagination and my graphic artist, his imagination, which came together. And we played with it. So yeah, I mean, this particular one, which is here, he's smoking. I mean, he was, I think, about 14 years old, and he used to go around town with his friends looking for cigarette stubs, and they used to smoke on the sly. So this is purely my imagination of Gandhi. It's my interpretation. So anybody can question it, it's up to them, but this is my interpretation. That's where freedom of speech comes in our country. And Gandhi gives us the liberty to express ourselves, I think. This is a page where Gandhi is showing anger, and he's having a sort of an argument with his wife, Kasturba. This is an incident where Gandhi goes into a salon to get a haircut in South Africa, and because of the color of his skin, he is shunted out. And you know, Gandhi being Gandhi, he believed in self-service. He did not want to depend on anybody anytime. He went home, he got a pair of scissors and cut his own hair. So, yeah, there are various images here. This is on the left where he's flexing his muscles is something where, again, due to peer pressure from his friends when he was rather young, that if he would eat meat, the British could be driven out of the country. So he experimented with that as well, and he was totally, I would say, distressed with the fact that he ate meat, and he was getting these nightmares that the goat is eating him up and all that, and he belonged to a completely pure vegetarian Vaishnav family, so it was almost sacrilege, and he couldn't sort of deal with it. He was dying of guilt, and he really thought deeply about it, that it's not going well with his persona and his, you know, internal values, and he left it. But the fact is, he tried it. So the crux of all this here is that you need to sort of try everything in life in good measure, and make your own choices, and those choices will lead to changes wherever you are for yourself.
One of the, so one of the things that you sort of just mentioned, right, and it is reflected both in the autobiography and in your adaptation of it, is that it's easy to see why he's such a polarizing figure, right, both in his time and in ours. And he's not uniquely polarizing, and he's not more polarizing today than he was previously, but he is still nonetheless very polarizing. And clearly you think that his autobiography is an important story and it needs to be told. But it is interesting for me that you seem that you don't seem at all sort of conflicted by certain elements, either of the person awe of him, and you're not. I mean, what is your like? When you were left with the autobiography, other than it clearly being a story that you think received more, demands more of an audience than it's received, I mean, in what other way did it leave you when you were working through it?
Well, I just don't want to harp on the positivities of Gandhi. No, that's not my intention. When I read the autobiography, the first thing that came to me was he was such an ordinary man with such experiences of fears and failures and ups and downs in his life, right? He was not a picture of perfection at any given time. He was full of prejudices. He was full of his fears. He was rather mean to his wife Kasturba. He was absolutely, I would say, terrible to his children, who he didn't send to school. But those are the things that I like about the individual, that he has put it out for you to read and to judge him the way you want. He's there for everybody to judge. And I think that's what makes him this figure that can go without running into any sort of controversy till date. I mean, you can, he belongs to everyone, but no one really. If you talk about, say, Ambedkar today or Shivaji today or Veer Sarwakar today, and if you have, say, a film on these individuals or a theatre performance, there could be some sort of aggression. But when it comes to Gandhi, about 5 to 6 books are written about him every year. There are plays, theatres, comments, critiques, but I don't see any sort of aggression that comes along with Gandhi. He's such a sort of a secular figurehead that we have in our country. He sort of just binds everybody in that sense, despite his angularities.
But it's interesting, if you do think that he's that entrenched, why did you pick him in particular as somebody who needs more attention? You could have thought that there are many others actually.
See, with this book, it's not about this book or me. With this book, what I'm trying to propagate is, number one, a discourse on Gandhi in the contemporary context. That's one. And in that discourse, what does he bring? Basic values which are universal to each one of us, right? He brings truth. He brings non-violence, right? He brings environment conservation. He brings eat healthy. He brings inclusiveness, right? So these are issues or values that are time immemorial, and they should be carried on.
And I suppose the one answer to that, right, and somebody might sort of push you just on this, is that in some sense you could make the claim that he's actually kind of dated, and that in a sense the reason why a sort of Gandhian vision, even at independence, sort of fades into oblivion in the 2 or 3 years before his death, is that, and the argument sort of made by a lot of people who are close to him, but who basically put forth a very strong vision of an alternative kind of nation state, people like Nehru and so on, is simply that, look, Gandhi is out of touch with reality, and there's a critique of modern civilization, there's a critique of technology, there's a critique of just industry, there's a critique of commerce, there's a critique of all of this, which doesn't negotiate political reality in any sort of in any practical and realistic way. And so in some sense, do you think that he's like part of why Gandhi is missing isn't that there's a moral failure, or there's a failure in values, or any of that, but simply that, look, he was great for his time, he was a fantastic political mobilizer, he did it with an extraordinary ethical core, but maybe he's not the guy for nation building.
I disagree with that, because as I said, these values that he carried with him are universal, and I think they're still relevant today in our daily lives. They're very important. Yes, but the brand Gandhi, yes, has been diluted over the years. We treat him like a legend that was maybe 1,000, 2,000 years ago. He was a very recent phenomena, right? And what he did at his point of time, yes, worked for him, and that's why he is where he is. But there were many leaders at that time which coexisted with Gandhi. Why are they not put on the same pedestal as Gandhi? What was so special about this man. Obviously, there was something about him that we are still talking about him. We are still erecting statues across the world till date. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 5 times. Why? There's got to be some madness to this person, right?
Um, the other thing I want to ask is that, so with regard to the autobiography, right, it fits into a much larger corpus of Gandhi's work, his life. In some sense, it tells the story of Gandhi even before he becomes a political superstar in some ways, right?
Yes.
And that's true of a lot of his other work as well, right? So Hind Swaraj comes out in 1909, on the way when I mean, it's sort of fought basically 4 decades before independence. And you see, I mean, that's another interesting feature of Gandhi, right? A lot of his explications of both his personal and his ideological commitments come out a lot before he's actually such an important figure in mainstream Indian politics. And do you think that there's something particular and sort of something particularly important about the period covered by the autobiography? Because even the title of your book, right,
Yes,
is
it
you're
is
interested
important.
in the young Gandhi in
Yes.
some ways.
Young, because you see, we've put, as the presentation also said, we've put Gandhi on a pedestal today. And in our country, we tend to revere people who are on a pedestal, almost godlike. And when we do that, we distance ourselves from them, and we don't want to touch that figure there. So Gandhi today is in government offices' walls. He's framed there. He's remembered on the 2nd of October and 30th of January. He's reduced to a 2,000 rupee note now, you know, or a stamp. So, you know, we've boxed the person and distanced ourselves from him. So one thing that we need to do is sort of get rid of this barrier and this book is, I think, I intend this book, whoever reads it, that barrier should sort of be broken and take Gandhi as a real individual, as an individual who you and I can sort of empathize with, associate with, because things like when he went to school, he hated mathematics. I hate mathematics. He fainted, broke out into a sweat, public speaking. He was shit scared of public speaking, and so am I. So, I mean, if Gandhi was like that, who we revere to be such a greater, larger than life man, then I can also be Gandhi in my small ways and make small sort of changes in my surroundings in whichever way I can. I can pick up a piece of litter and put it in my pocket. I can save water while brushing my teeth. So, I mean, he's an ordinary man. Learn from him. He's not some, you know, god that we cannot associate with. He was born amongst us. He's human. And if he could achieve so much, so can we. That's my main thing. And it's more for the youngsters and young adults who are still sort of coming of age. They sort of need to think really deeply about these values. The other thing that I learned from writing this book and reading on Gandhi was that you need to think deeply, very deeply about your thoughts, your actions. I never did that. Spur of the moment, happy-go-lucky, chal raha hai, you see. But now, as I'm reading this, whatever that he did, he always thought of the consequences of that. I've eaten meat. Now, what can happen to me? My tummy can get spoiled. Who all will be angry with me? My friends will be happy. My mother will be angry. What do I feel? Have I done the right thing or not? You know, he constantly did his introspection, be it with ahimsa, be it with brahmacharya, be it with satyagraha, and all these things sort of after introspection, then he took his decisions and went forward. Yes, on one side I find him totally extreme. You've got to be like really wired in a different way to think like him. He always thought really differently. And that's what made him a Mahatma. We made him a Mahatma. So, yeah.
It is true. I mean, a lot of his fears actually are striking. One of the interesting things about Gandhi is, as you know, he always slept with the light on in the room because he was terrified of sleeping in a dark room, which is just, I find that to be absolutely remarkable. But I want to just, before we open it up sort of for Q&A and all that, I want to just push you a little. So one of the things that you've said repeatedly, right, is that how you think that there are certain kinds of values and so on. And I want you to, can you explicate a little on what you think, like, some of the big themes that you've drawn on are. So one of the things that we've talked about separately just before this session that you said you were struck by was patience, right?
Yeah.
And that's interesting. And you see that both in his practices. So for instance, there's a famous moment, right, where someone goes to Gandhi in the early 40s and says that, look, I've been spinning for 2 days, and what am I now supposed to do? And I've just been doing it for 2 full days. And Gandhi sort of looks at him bemused and says, I mean, whatever do you mean? The whole point is to just keep spinning. And that's just the story. And you see that also actually in his written work. So in Hind Swaraj, one of the remarkable things about the book is that because it's a dialogue, the entire book is a dialogue, he's sort of forcing the reader to take a huge amount of time to actually get the conclusion. And there's an emphasis in which he's constantly trying to make you wait. And so that's one that you've talked about, and you may want to articulate that further. But can you just say a little, because this is often like a vague idea, like people will often say, you know, Gandhi has these great moral values, this, that,
Right.
but what do you really think are sort of some of the big themes, either that have
The big
moved
themes,
you?
I have, because I'm a filmmaker, I've made a short animation film for you all, 1 minute 40 seconds. Can we play it now? It sort of answers his question. Can we play the film now, please?
मैं आप में से हर किसी के अंदर हूँ। मैं आप ही के जरिए तो जीता हूँ अपनी जिंदगी। मैं महज विचार हूँ, एक सही
Can we
कदम।
learn some questions?
दिल की बात करें, मैं एक जुबान हूँ, वैसे इरादे से आजाद। मैं गांधी।
तकनीक मुझे सशक्त बनाती है, यह मुझे अपनी जड़ों के नज़दीक लाती है। मैं आत्मनिर्भर हूँ अपने माहौल में, मैं शायद आराम से हूँ। एक दिन मैं उभर पड़ूंगा फिर से अपनी तमाम ताकत के साथ। आखिरकार मैं ही गांधी हूँ ना।
सादगी मेरी पहचान है, मेरी छाया है। खादी मेरा स्टाइल है और मैं गांधी।
फल, दूध, दही, हरी सब्जियां, स्वच्छ आहार, मेरा खान पान हर किसी तंदुरुस्त इंसान का सपना है। मैं स्वस्थ गांधी हूँ।
मेरी कसरत का राज, मैं चलकर गांव
गली में करता हूँ राज। मैं गांधी हूँ जनाब।
मैं अपनी जमीन से मोहब्बत करता हूँ, सिर्फ जरूरत भर लेता हूँ। मैं हरियाली हूँ, मैं गांधी।
हम सब में एक छोटा सा गांधी है। चलिए उस गांधी को अपने अंदर तलाशें, इस गांधी को तलाशें।
I think we can take
Should we
Q&A?
do it? Okay, so let's, I mean, I think it'll be nice to have other people apart from me asking questions, basically. So I think we can just sort of open it up for Q&A.
Yes.
And then we'll just see where that goes.
Hello. As you told that you are not a good reader, and
Yes.
you were forced to read this Experiment with Truth of Mahatma Gandhi, and that drove you even to write a book based on that.
Ji.
And you said that you were very much impacted, that drove you to write the book. My question is that you have written a graphic book on My Experiment with Truth, and you have been impacted by that.
Yes.
So, does it mean that the impact has been that now you have been transformed into a 100% honest and truthful person?
No.
That is my first question.
No.
because what you told that drove me and impacted me.
Yes.
Because the very outstanding quality of Gandhi is that he is absolutely truthful and very, very honest. He shares something inner in his deepest inner things,
Yes.
very honestly. And secondly, how did you handle the challenge of portraying a genuinely honest and truthful person in a graphical form? Because you can write a lot and say that how when a person is talking in first person, he can always portray that. But when you put it into graphics, was it a big challenge or easy?
I'll answer the second one. first. Well, it was a challenge obviously because I had to put pictures to text and I had to imagine a lot of things. Few of the pictures, obviously after doing a lot of research, I went to Porbandar where they have this museum and they had a full compilation of Gandhi's sort of life in terms of a visual library. So we've picked out certain elements from that in the drawings wherever we could. But partly I had to sort of take the challenge on of using my own imagination to create the picture. So for example, the smoking scene, there's one scene where he's fantasizing about Kasturba as this goddess. He's sitting in his class, but he's thinking of her, you know. So yeah, it was a challenge, but it was a fun challenge to deal with. And again, I always had that at the back of my mind that because it is to do with Gandhi, I should keep the sensibility intact. I didn't want to again come across as frivolous. So I think I have tried to maintain that. And the first question about being truthful, I have to say it's a very tough task to follow his footsteps. His benchmark, yes, is very high. So whatever little that I can do, I do in my daily life. But it's a learning process. I will till my dying day be learning. So that's how it is.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Ma'am, I just want to ask you, as per the concern of today in India, we the people, if we demand something or want to fulfill something with our regards to whether it is reservation mostly.
Yes.
So we do follow the path of violence because government do listens those of the things with us. So I just want to know from you, just you give us the message on that, that we made us on the behalf of media what media show us.
Sorry?
What we made us on the behalf of media what media show us. So who has to be following the more Gandhian ideology, the media or the us? Like even?
I didn't get it. Did you?
I mean, I'm not sure I got it either. But I think sort of one way to ask the question is that a lot of our vision, at least of the world, is in part shaped by the knowledge that we get, either through the media or through other sources. And so the question is that who's Gandhi's audience? Is it like should the people who really focus on it be people like in the media
again,
and all
I have been very tactful in what I have done. I have covered a lifespan which inspired me from his Porbandar days till he joins mainstream politics. Politics gets murky, you see. Till the time he was not into politics, he was a social activist, right? He could take decisions as black and white. Once you come in the area of politics, you have to be grey as well. Then Gandhi had to make many compromises, I feel. So that's why I have chosen the time period for this book where he was himself, which is very important. No, I don't think so. It's a very powerful tool, non-violence, and it is needed in today's time more than anything else in across the world. Look what's happening in Turkey, Syria, wherever. So this is my way of telling you people, please talk about Gandhi as much as possible, act on behalf of Gandhi as his ambassadors. We can only do as much as we can, I understand, but somebody's got to do it somewhere, right?
See, just coming out of that question is, so you ask any young generation of India, they will say they don't believe in non-violence. The moment you ask about Gandhi, they will pit against Bhagat Singh. कि उन्होंने भगत सिंह के साथ अन्याय किया. See this irony, we celebrate 2nd October as International Day for Non-Violence, and their hero is now Bhagat Singh. I'm not ready. You know, the idea is now one sense of pitting one hero against another. Gandhi versus Bhagat Singh, Gandhi versus Ambedkar.
That is always the case. Comparisons will always
what I'm just
come.
trying to understand, it's more of an aggression that is coming into the generation who doesn't believe in the path of non-violence. They will say, they will claim that they believe in non-violence, they will believe in truth, but when it comes to identifying Gandhi, they ridicule him.
Well, it has
It's
become
the
the
idea
norm.
of not able to practice, so ridicule him.
No, it has become the norm of the world that violence is more attractive than peace. So if you look at video games which our children are playing, they prefer shooting down people in those video games. But there are people, on the other hand, in the same industry who are designing video games which are peace games, and I'm also one of them. I design peace games as well. Another interesting game that has been designed in the US, in which they tag you your heartbeat, wherever your pulse. It's a motor racing game. The more calm and cool you are, the motor is going faster. You see? So this is what we need to sort of incorporate. People are doing it, NGOs are doing it, activists are working at it, but yes, sadly violence has overtaken our society and the world by force. That is why Gandhi is needed, Gandhians are needed today. Young Gandhians. Are we done?
Janhavi,
Last question.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to reading your book. I wish you had had more time to talk about your book and we had a more modest moderator in this session. So that's just feedback to the moderator. I want to ask if would Gandhi, I appreciate the fact that what you raise are the values, and these are universal values. If I look at Gandhi through feminist eyes, there'd be much to criticize in terms of his actions, and I absolutely get that in the input, and I will see that in the book, no doubt. Would Gandhi be a disruptor, considered a disruptor in 21st century India?
In context of the feminist issues?
No, just generally, caste, class, consumerism on a whole range of fronts. Just a personal, private opinion, not related to the book necessarily.
Well, by now I think you know where my sort of loyalties lie. So I don't think so he would be a disruptor at all, not at all. Yes, that's why this book is there then. In the positive sense, yes. The idea is to disrupt our beliefs about Gandhi and the values. These values are so important that they need to be brought back into our mainstream to disrupt ideas like violence and aggression that we carry with us maybe on the road when people are honking, spitting, especially in our country. So yes, that is one of the great things that you've said, that yes, he will be a disruptor for the positive. Yeah, Chavi? Can you give her a mic? Last question, please.
Well, thanks, Janhavi, for putting this together. My question to you is, in the current day and time, and you work so much through Youth for Gandhi.
Yeah.
The values, yes, we are missing that in the society. Have you thought about getting this book into schools, especially early on, so that that impact which our youth clearly needs can happen in a bigger way?
Yes, yes. In fact, that is my real focus, to get this book translated first in various constitutional languages across India and plug them in every school library if I can. Will need a lot of help and pull and push from the government and my agent, who is sitting somewhere here, who will guide me with that. Done? Yeah, thanks.
You happy to sign?
Sorry?
You happy to do a signing?
Yes.
Sure. Okay, fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen of Sambad, please once again thank Janhavi, Prasada and Madhav Khosla.
Thank you everyone.
Janhavi will be doing a short signing just at our author signing tent, which is just behind our AV tent to my right over here. Our next session kicks off at 11:15. It is session 118, which is Vikram and Bital, which is Deepa Agarwal and Natasha